For my presentation, I was given Edward Thorndike, an American psychologist. Throughout this presentation, I will give you a few facts of what Edward Thorndike brought to education, what he brought to psychology, his family, his career, and influencers. Edward Thorndike's theory was responses that are immediately followed by a satisfactory outcome become more strongly associated with the situation and are therefore more likely to occur again in the future. Conversely, responses followed by negative outcomes become more weakly associated and less likely to recur in the future. About Edward Thorndike. Edward Thorndike was born on August 31st, 1874, in Williamsburg, Massachusetts. He was the second child of four. Thorndike was born into a religious family, but later in life, he decided to commit to inductivism. His parents were Edward Robert Thorndike and Abigail Brewster Ladd. His dad had started pursuing a law degree, but later became a preacher at a Methodist church. His mom is remembered for her extraordinary intelligence, artistic ability, and her gentleness. Edward Thorndike's parents put an emphasis on education. They taught Edward to write at an early age, sending him to school when he was only 5. By the time he was 12, Edward had attended 3 different high schools. Thorndike would later graduate from Roxbury Latin School in 1891. After graduating high school, Thorndike went to Westline University and received a Bachelor of Science degree in 1885. After graduating, he enrolled at Harvard University to study English and French literature. He then completed his master's degree in 1897. His love for psychology was then soon discovered after his first semester at the university. Thorndike would then switch his study to psychology. And in 1890, Edward Thorndike married Elizabeth Moulton. Thorndike's career. Thorndike later went to attend Columbia University, where he earned his Ph.D. This is where his career began in education, as he became an assistant professor of pedagogy at Case Western Reserve University. Shortly after, he decided to switch jobs and become a psychology professor at the Teachers College at Columbia University. This is also where he taught for the remainder of his career. Wanted to study learning in children, but was delayed because there were no available subjects, he decided to put his focus in animals. Thorndike was best known for the theory he called the law of effect. In the 1900s, Thorndike would publish 2 works outlining applications of learning and testing principles, Educational Psychology and Introduction to the Theory of Mental and Social Measurement. His dissertation, Animal Intelligence, an experimental study of the associative process in animals, is considered a landmark study that introduced the concept of studying animal learning in the lab and proved that the observation of animal behavior could help solve general problems in psychology. Claim to fame. Thorndike had a huge impact on psychology. In 1904, there was the introduction to the theory of mental and social measurements. 1905, the elements of psychology. 1911, animal intelligence. 1913, educational psychology. 1926, the measurement of intelligence. 1932, the fundamentals of learning. Best known for his theory he called the law of effect, which emerged from his research how cats learn to escape from the puzzle box. Throughout his work and theories, Thorndike became strongly associated with the American school of thought known as functionalism. Other prominent functionalist thinkers included Harvey Carr, James Rowling, Engel, and John Dewey. Elected as president of the American Psychological Association in 1912 and became one of the very first psychologists to be admitted to the National Academy of Science in 1917. Thorndike is best remembered, again, for his famous animal experiments and for the law of effect. The influencer. Edwin Ray Guthrie, behavioral psychologist, born in 1886, died in 1959. Mr. Edwin was best known for his teaching and writing on psychology of learning and applying his principles to the understanding of everyday behaviors. He also discovered the power of positive reinforcement learning. Edward Thorndike began many researches. He proposed the principle of belongings that Collett's basic principle of classical conditioning, namely that those elements most associated in space and time would be connected in learning. Thorndike examined problem-solving strategies in a variety of species, which he tested in puzzle boxes, consisting of a series of chambers designed to reward specific responses. Edward Thorndike was the epitome of trial and error. In the 1920s, Thorndike continued his investigations of adult learning, revealing that continued learning ability was determined by inborn personal factors rather than age. His work also included the psychology of one's interest and attitude, and human nature in the social order. The influence of Thorndike on psychology today. Thorndike had a major influence on today's education. He emphasized the importance of measurements and testing in education. He believed that if anything exists, it exists in some amount and can therefore be measured. He developed the test of reading skills, English usage, and spelling, and college entrance tests. Due to his significant early influence, he has sometimes been referred to as the founder of modern educational psychology. Wrote the first book on educational psychology, and developed the first university course in educational measurement. Now here's an overview of everything that I covered about Edward Thorndike. Edward Thorndike, in full, Edward Lee Thorndike, born August 31st, 1874, Williamsburg, Massachusetts, and he died August 9, 1949, in Montrose, New York. The American psychologist whose work on animal behavior and the learning process led to the theory of connectism, which states that behavior responses to specific stimuli are established through a process of trial and error that affects neural connections between the stimuli and the most satisfying responses. Thorndike graduated from Wesleyan University in 1895. He studied animal behavior with William James at Harvard University, 1895 through 1897, and with James McKean Catter, who was also his academic advisor at Columbia University, where he received his PhD in 1898, and where he spent most of his career. He first proposed his two behavior laws, the law of effect and the law of exercise, in his doctoral dissertation, which was published in 1911 as Animal Intelligence. He regarded adaptive changes in animal behavior as analogous to human learning and suggested that behavioral associations could be predicted by application of the two laws. The law of effect stated that those behavioral responses that were most closely followed by a satisfying result were most likely to become established patterns and to occur again in the response of the same stimulus. The law of exercise stated that behavior is more strongly established through frequent connections of stimulus and response. In 1932, Thorndike determined that the second of his laws was not entirely valid in all cases. He also modified the law of effect to state that rewards for appropriate behavior always substantially strengthen associations, whereas punishments for inappropriate responses only slightly weaken the association between the stimulus and the wrong response. Thorndike's early work is regarded as the first laboratory study of animal learning. His emphasis on measurement and the quantitative analysis of data, as opposed to merely descriptive accounts of experiments, has enormously influential in modern psychology, particularly affecting behavioralist experimentation. As professor of educational psychology at Columbia from 1904 to 1940, Thorndike contributed to the development of a more scientifically grounded and efficient type of schooling. He emphasized the use of statistics and social science research, chiefly through his handbook, An Introduction to the Theory of Mental and Social Measurements. Other important works in the early part of his career were The Principles of Teaching, based on psychology, a first book, An Educational Psychology, Volume 3. These books were responsible for many of the earliest applications of psychology to a classroom instruction in arithmetic, algebra, reading, writing, and language, and also did much to expose the deficiencies and inequalities in the American educational system of the time. As you can see, Thorndike had a very important impact on psychology today. Here you can find resources on where information about Edward Thorndike was found.